about relationships, dating, sex, and inner game and mindset topics. And today we're going to talk about cohabitation. So, this is kind of one that affects people's lives in a lot of different ways. And I think there's just a lot of assumptions about it on different sides of the argument as to whether or not, you know, it's assumed that you would cohabitate or not with somebody. It seems to not like be thought through very well by most people. You got one side, when you look at like red pill and manosphere spaces where people are like, well, I'd never live with a woman. I'd never cohabitate. And there's very few people that execute that well, but it can be done and it's okay. I mean, it's good. It's good if you want to run your life like that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to talk about the pros of that. And I say when I say it's rarely done well, or I rarely see it done well, it's because what I mean by that is it's usually a cap. In other words, guys who aren't in long-term relationships and aren't in a situation where they are planning like some sort of long-term life with somebody, and a lot of these guys aren't even dating, right? And they have a scarcity of women. They're the ones who want to talk about how you would never cohabitate with a woman. Now, there are guys out there who take that stance who have long-term girlfriends and they don't live together. So I'm not talking about those guys. All right. But that doesn't happen as often. So when people are on the internet space talking about never live with a woman and this and that, they're usually guys who aren't getting girls. You're going to find that theme a lot of times with a lot of these topics, that a lot of in terms of sheer numbers of people who take these, these stances and these opinions, right? Like they're not actually dating or banging women. So it's like, okay, like maybe you should worry about getting a date first before you worry about whether or not you'd live with a chick, and so that's just that. But it's also just sort of assumed that if you're with somebody long enough, or if you're, and this is more the general populace assumes, well, if you're together long enough, you're just you're just going to live together. Like that's just sort of assumed and rather normalized, when maybe that shouldn't be the case either, right? Because there's a lot of reasons to not cohabitate, as many as there are reasons to cohabitate. And so there's a lot of dangers to that. We're going to just talk about those dangers today and unravel some things for you guys. And of course, if you are interested in getting any questions answered or getting into any other tangents, please throw in a super chat or say something about it, and Glenn will field those to me. That's the benefit of being on a live show, is that I can answer some of your questions, and we oftentimes get really good ones because we are trying to, at least attempting to have a higher level of discussion here. So, cohabitation. Let's talk about on the side of when it's bad. All right. So first off, I kind of want to start on a Psychology Today article. There's a lot of articles about this. I'm going to sort of skim this one. It's titled "The Hidden Risks of Cohabitation," and yeah. So let's see. Don't want to read that. Well, yeah. So he says stories on cohabitation never fail to generate discussion and arguments. I think it's because for the past 40 years, cohabitation has been on the vanguard of massive changes in how people partner up and do or don't do marriage. So that was a pretty accurate statement. It used to be just that you would get married and you'd live together. You'd have traditional family, have kids, but people are doing things a lot differently now. you know? And so there's a lot of different dynamics we want to look at. And even if you are going to live together and do the traditional marriage, there's things now that you need to be aware of with making that decision as a man, so that maintain your leadership and frame in that relationship, and that you guys can have a happy life together, and that you're not going to fall apart in this cohabitation, situation, right? So we get ready to skip over to this part. For decades, people have believed that living together would increase their odds of doing well in marriage. The core of this idea is that cohabitating would provide a test of a relationship. This seems logical, but mysteriously, decades of research do not show this benefit. In fact, until recently, the overwhelming majority of studies showed that cohabitation before marriage was associated with poorer or worse odds of stability and happiness in the marriage. This has changed. Recent studies show that association with higher risk has dissipated or disappeared for some groups. And while the headlines tend to say there is no longer any risk, that's very misleading, and I'll explain why. Understanding that what I describe here can make a person better and more informed decisions, blah, blah. Okay. So, yeah, what you had was a situation where it was taboo to cohabitate with somebody. So when traditional marriage was more the theme, right? And people got married, that's what they did. And it wasn't acceptable to like be living with somebody in a lot of places of the United States and the Western world, and well, everywhere really, without having some sort of marriage contract. So that was really frowned upon. So when people were moving in together, despite the religious belief that, and the social belief that this is wrong, that tended to set up a bad framework for long-term success. And so that's why that data sort of shows that. Maybe. And I say maybe because there's other elements here. But so we look at, okay, the mindset of somebody who's going to move in with somebody else back then, but they weren't going to be married, was not a mindset of, oftentimes, not a mindset of long-term commitment, right? So the idea was, well, they were really hedging their bets, more or less conditionally saying, well, we'll see. And their mindset and focal point was on the possibility of it not working out rather than working towards the commitment. And so that sort of mental framework, and not, not taking this, not wanting to take this risk, if you will, of marriage, but wanting to live together to see, meant that, you had one foot out the door, right? Or she did. And it created an insecure commitment and not a lot of emotional buy-in, which I talk about a lot, to want to keep it together. So when things would get hard, what would happen? They would exit the relationship. So that's one argument as to why the data was like that. You know what I mean? Another argument, though, could be that these were relationships that wouldn't have been good anyway. Right. And so that's another possibility, that, hey, these relationships wouldn't have been good for long-term success, whether there was a marriage behind it or not. And so by living together, they just sort of found that out. I would have to say that is probably more the case, that I would go with the second argument on that one, where it's a lot of religious, especially Christian Catholic in particular, really big on not cohabitating. I think Muslims too are big on not living together before like a marriage contract. They might disagree. They might think that it's more the first reason that people don't have the mindset of long-term success. But I think that could be a lot of cases, but I think that really it's
It's
more
illegal for Muslims.
illegal. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. Not the but I thought so. But yeah, so like, it's really the I think though that if people are have the it's not like it's cause and effect, right? In other words, when people make it long term, right? Whether there's a marriage contract or not, they have a mindset of being together long term when they choose to live together. Like that's their mindset going into it usually, and that's their framework. And they have the relationship skills to make that happen. And they have the capabilities in terms of their ability to attach to the other person to make that happen, you know? And so those things put together, it makes for a better chance of long-term success. Whether they say the magic words in front of the church or the mosque or wherever or not, right? Whether they say the magic words and have the party and be married, okay, and have the marriage contract or not, when the mindset of being together, not just the mindset, but the capabilities, the neurochemical ability to attach to another person in a healthy way, and the skill sets, the relationship skill sets, which are not to be taken for granted. Everyone thinks it's easy, but then if it were easy, then everyone would be doing it. And actually, most people are not doing it effectively. Most people do not do relationships effectively. Okay, they break up, they fall apart after the honeymoon phase is over. It's really just a matter of time, living together or not living together. So I think when those elements of being able to be together long term are there for both partners and both partners are a good match, I think they're going to make it whether or not they have a marriage contract or not, whether they live together or not. Okay. So those variables, in my opinion, are not the things that would necessarily cause it to break. If you don't have the skills to stay together, and I'll talk about what some of those things are, then moving in together or even throwing a marital contract on top of it, that's only going to complicate and make those things harder. You know what I mean? If somebody doesn't have the skills and isn't willing to go get the skills and doesn't have a mindset of staying together, then it doesn't work. Now, back in the day, a marriage contract what meant something a lot more than it does today. All right. So like back in the day, it was people didn't get divorced. That was even frowned. That was a divorce was frowned upon even more so than cohabitating ahead of time. So people might get into these relationships without the relationship skills, without maybe some capabilities and some different things, but we'll just say the skills, right? And without the right mindset. And if they're not married, then it falls apart and they break up, right? But if they are married, then it falls apart still, but maybe they find a way to stay together. In most cases, I'm not very optimistic. I think in most cases, they're finding a way to stay together is really a subpar relationship that they just stayed in a commitment, and then they rationalize their own happiness. That's what I think most of these things turn into. I think that there are very few relationships that I would want or that you would want if you're listening to me, which are peak relationships. They're really good, genuinely happy, genuinely checking all the blocks for each other and helping complement each other's life and further each other's goals and like getting in the right direction and doing that long term for decades, right? Like that does happen. That's what the goal is, really, if you are getting into long term relationships. But that's happening less and less even today because of people's inability now, right? And their lack of mindset towards that. But I mean, I think there are some that, of course, some marriages for sure that they found that way to be happy. But I think for the most part, those marriages back when the statistics showed that cohabitation was problematic for marriage, I think that was just because they didn't have the skills or the mindset and they broke up, right? Or when they were, if they were married, they didn't break up, but they found a way, right? But that's not necessarily always having, the best skills and abilities and getting what you want. They didn't, you know what I mean? So they're not having an optimal thing. They're just sticking it out. And that shows today too, that a lot of the marriages that do stay together, about half of the marriages at least that stay together are not happy. And we look at past the 8-year mark, right, is when the data looks at it. So even past the 8-year mark, about half the marriages, they're sticking together, but they report genuinely, like generally report unhappiness. And then the other half, there's some level of happiness with, it basically saying they'd be better off, that they're better off staying right together. So that tends to be the data on that. Now, when we moved away from, though, it being taboo, well, now marriage is, it's acceptable to live together. It's acceptable to be married. It's acceptable to not be married, right? Like it's all fine. So now it's like it doesn't really affect anything. It seems like it goes back, and marriages too. That's another thing. Marriages are really an easy contract to break. Maybe hardship financially and hardship on the people doing it, but it's like the social stigma is not there anymore. It's not, if you have kids involved in certain states, they make you wait a certain amount of time. But other than that, like people break marriage contracts all the time. It's not like this big deal it once was, at least not socially and psychologically. Now, sure, financially and for, the kids and for assets, like for a lot of things, it's detrimental. It's really bad, for certain couples and certain people. But, the as far as how we think about marriage, divorce is not something we flinch at, right? So given that, like, whether somebody lives together, not lives together, it doesn't seem to affect, those outcomes. All right. But let's see what he has to say. Says, let's start with the current research shows. So for readers who are either ideologically pro or against, I'm not, he's okay. That's fine. Whatever. Among those who cohabitated before marriage, people who fit the following categories are likely to have marital outcomes similar to those who did not live together before marriage. That is, those having these characteristics do not show type of added risks that would be associated over the past few decades with living together before marriage. All right. So here's some data, right? Basically, could they, whether it matters or not, if they cohabitate or not before marriage. So the data that, according to the article, what he's saying is the three characteristics that increase a person's chances of success, basically, in having would be number one, only ever having cohabitated with the person that they would end up marrying. So that's one thing. We're looking at marriage stats here, right? So if they cohabitated prior to marriage, but never did that with anyone else, then that increases their chances that, they're going to survive the marriage as well as, from living together. And that makes sense, right? Because if somebody is, if you're with some chick who's lived with a guy 4 different times, well, I mean, she's practiced on breaking up and taking her shit and leaving. Like that's not, unheard of for her. So like when stuff gets hard, what do you think's going to happen, right? And so moving in with someone isn't a big deal. So for that person, whereas somebody who's never lived with a dude before, always lived on her own or with her parents or with roommates, and now she's moving in with a guy, she sees that as a much bigger deal, a much bigger decision. And so it would make sense that it would be more probable, if it's the first time she's cohabitating, that it's also going to be the person she intends to stay with. The second thing is only begin to cohabitate after having clear, mutual understood plans to marry their spouse. Well, whether you put the word marriage to it or not, I think that that's pretty clear too. If you're going to live with somebody, or you're just living with somebody because, it's see what happens or whatever, like, I mean, not frowning on it, but I mean, the chances of a breakup and having her move her stuff out or you move your stuff out, um, when you're just trying to see or save money on rent or whatever those reasons are, the chances are much higher. If you actually have long-term plans to stay together and are trying to build a life together, whether that means getting married or not, it would stand to reason that, moving in together is more likely to, you're likely to stay together despite moving in together, right? And then the third piece of data that he found was did not cohabitate until the age of 23 or later. That also makes sense considering um nowadays, and it's just we live longer nowadays and we expect more out of our relationships. So the times of an 18-year-old girl getting, hitched right out of high school and then, pregnant with 3 kids before she's 23, those days really aren't around there anymore. And with a global sexual marketplace, meaning that she has access to the internet and a life and can see lifestyles outside of hers all over the world, to include having access to men all over the world, and her options are expanded from just her small town back when, 18-year-old high school girl used to get married. Um, she's got a lot more choices now. Or at least there's the illusion that she has a lot more choices. And we're also living longer too, and we also expect more out of our relationships. It was fine, just fine in maybe the 50s for, some chick to live in a small town, you know barefoot and pregnant type situation, and I waiting for her man to come home, and it was just like a lukewarm relationship, right? And they just sort of were making it work, right? They're not expecting the level of needs that one expects to get from their relationships nowadays. And that's both from the guy and the girl side. I mean, our expectations of what we want out of it, what we want our part with our partners, and what would make us stick around with somebody, and what would make us not stick around. Our expectations have raised a lot. You know what I mean? When it comes to the long-term relationship. And that's on both sides. That's on women and that's on men. That's not just women, constantly wanting a better deal or the unending attention they can get off of Instagram from simps. Yeah, that's an element that does play a role, but guys too want more out of it. Guys don't want to put up with certain things, although arguably there's a lot to put up with now than there was back then, you know, but arguably, right? But we tend to just have like we want more than just the average marriage. Now, there's a lot of guys out there that just want that, but there's more and more people that want to have really good, happy relationships, not just sort of be married to the ball and chain, you know what I mean, situation, right? And those tend to just fail nowadays, and people find themselves unhappy, both men and women. So expectations are definitely higher, you know what I mean? And with expectations being higher, it requires a higher level of maturity. And I would say it requires a higher level of maturity for the woman, particularly to know that she's making her best choice. Remember, women are hypergamous. Most guys out there would be just fine, you know, picking up a hot, let's say 21-year-old to keep it adult, you know. Um, little controversy if I say 18 or 19-year-old, even though legally that's an adult. Let's say a 21-year-old. She's a hot, sexy 21-year-old, and his sexual needs are met, and she compliments his life enough. She does what she's told. you know, Most guys, like, they're cool with that. You know, whether the guy's 25, whether the guy's 30, or whether the guy's 60. You know what I mean? That's what most guys would be just fine with. It's the woman that is gonna be drama and questioning stuff and wondering if she made the right choice. That's what hypergamy does. That's what hypergamy is, right? And so at 18, she's always going to have that question. Did I make the right choice? So that becomes an issue. And that becomes an issue usually right before she turns right before she turns 30. Girl have an existential crisis. If she's been in a relationship and hasn't been exploring the sexual marketplace during their party years, she will have that crisis before she turns 30 and wonder if she's settling down with the best choice. And she'll have a tendency, a lot of women break up things and destroy their lives at that point. Women who got married young, you know, and may even have a couple kids, they find themselves divorced before 30. You know what I mean? Because they want to play the field, and that's not what they say. They'll say that the guy was toxic, or they'll say, and not to say that that's never the case, but oftentimes, just as many times as the guy is toxic, it's really the girl who's doing things that are completely out of pocket, right? Completely out of relationship boundaries. And the guy's getting frustrated and angry, and he might not have the skills on how to handle that and maintain his frame of being a non-toxic person. So what ends up happening to the frustrated guy whose 27, 28-year-old wife is running around town, right? He gets really mad and maybe does some toxic things. And then she leaves because he's toxic. Well, I think if you're doing things to cause behaviors in other people, there's a little bit responsibility that goes both ways, right? And so that's that's just that's I think there's as many times as the guy is, you know, a toxic person, or it's not even usually toxic, although she'll probably say that anyway, because that's a girl's go-to, is to say he's a narcissist or he's a toxic. That's a girl's go-to, is to blame the guy and say he's a bad man, right? But a lot of times it's not even that guy. The guy gets complacent. You know what I mean? So the guy is just. That's why most relationships do break up with it when it's being the guy's fault. It's just he's complacent. He's not trying. He doesn't care. He's checked himself out of that relationship. That happens a lot. And so she's, going, I'm not going to settle for this for the next 40, 50 years. And so she ends up breaking up with him and becomes a single mom at 28 or 29 or 30, and wants to hit the sexual marketplace and go on her whole phase spree, and hopefully snag a man before she becomes unattractive. I mean, that's what'll happen there, which is why I tell guys, it's interesting that the data here says 23 do not cohabitate until the age of 23 or later, which, that implies also don't marry until the age of 23 or later too, right? And when we looked at the odds of divorce, those odds are raised when you're dealing with younger people. And again, I would say because of girls and because of hypergamy, a lot of times, right? It very are responsible for those stats. So when I'm advising a guy and I say don't wife up a girl, or don't get into an LTR if she's under 25, what do I mean by that? I mean, you can have a commitment where she's committed to you, but you're not banging out kids. You're not living together. You're not doing the logistical things that are hard to get out of, you know, when she's 22 or 21. Okay. That's a bad idea. All right. I would say you live separate and be together. That's fine. She needs to be on like the catch and release program if she's on 25, if she's under 25, meaning she has to want the commitment, which that's a case no matter what her age is. She has to want it. She has to want to be in it, and she has to want to do the behaviors, right? Do relationship behaviors that fit levels of boundaries and respect for her partner. She has to be willing to want to do those things to have this guy's commitment, right? And if she's doing those things, then sure, we can be in a commitment. But there's no, again, no doing anything else other than, hey, we're sexually, together, and that's my girlfriend, that's my boyfriend, and whatever definition that means. There's no doing anything more than that in my recommendation until she at least gets into that epiphany stage where she starts to understand that she is, going to have to make a choice at some point to secure long-term success, and recognizes her own decline. That's what it is. A 20-year-old girl doesn't recognize her own decline yet. Even a emotionally erratic, girl that has idealizations about taking herself out, right? Like, even that crazy girl who's 20 still doesn't really conceptualize her decline, right? Which is her age related decline, where her options for having a guy and having the best guy she could get and having, even a family and children and all those things, those options are, becoming less and less as the years go on. Like, she doesn't feel that, even if she could logically understand it at 20. At 25, most girls don't feel it yet, but you're getting at least to an age where they can start to, right? Somewhere between 25 and 30 usually is when where she'll really sort of have that happen for her. Now, if she has been in a commitment, I think that can speed up the process of her having these questions, right? Like, is this the best I can do? When she hits 25, she might be like, shoot, I'm not getting any younger. That's a good thing. You want the girl that you're with, if you're in a relationship who's that young, to have that existential crisis, and then to hopefully, if you want to stay together with her, overcome that crisis, choose you and choose a life she's building with you as the best option. Once she does that and makes those choices, and there's evidence of that, now you can start thinking. Now it's a good time to start thinking about a family if you want to have a family. Now it's a good time to think about living together if that's what you want to do, combining things, building a life, where there's more financial dependence, right? There's more logistical combining of things, and possibly combining of DNA in terms of children. Those things are harder to break up and a lot messier. And so I wouldn't be doing that with a 21-year-old. You know what I mean? She's not mature enough. And you are at a high risk of her thinking it's a great idea at 21, and then at 27 handing you divorce papers, right? Or whatever, and taking all your money. All right. Like, it's not a good idea until she's sure, because she can't be sure, even if she thinks she's sure, at 20 and 21. Okay. She thinks she has endless options at 21. Her mindset's like, yeah, I'll commit to this guy, make him my boyfriend, get all the boyfriend benefits. And if it, in the back of her mind, whether she recognizes or not, if it doesn't work out, she'll just, do the breakup and find another guy. Like, no big deal, right? Well, say that to a 35-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big deal to a 35-year-old woman. So, or to a 30-year-old, or even a 28-year-old, right? Like, you see what I mean? And so for you guys looking at cohabitation or marriage, or putting any kind of combining of anything, that's, you don't do it, in my opinion, until the girl's around 25. This data says about 23 or later. Okay. So that's what he derived as far as cohabitation. And I think it's fair. And so I've been saying that for a while. It says 23 or later. I think 25 is more from a psychological standpoint rather than just like the data standpoint. In other words, like looking at statistics of what works out, what doesn't. And I think either way, it's a pretty good ballpark, right? So that's that little article, but we'll get into when cohabitation is a bad idea, because it's not necessarily about whether you get married or whether you don't get married. It depends on what you want and your long-term prospects of success. Okay. And so I'll break for questions though, actually, before I get into that list. So what do you got, Glenn? You got any good questions in the chat yet?
Yes, sir, we do. So we got one from Better Days. Better Days asks, he goes, hi. Wait a minute. I don't know what the M8 means. Okay, so I think it's hi. I'm not in terms of job, but do you have any favorite e-connection questions that spin into very powerful emotions? By the way, had a virgin, good girl, took the V and blew it years ago. Yeah. Besides that, let's see. Hold on. We got Valerie. She has a question. Let's see, Valerie. Let's pull you up, girl. No, that's not a question. Let's see, Valerie. Oh, we need to get Paul to do an interview with nuclear. No. Where's your question, Valerie? Where'd it go? She has a theory about why this happens, the topic we were speaking about. But she wants to hear your version and explanation.
Okay. What's the theory about what? What's the theory?
The topic today.
Our theory of why cohabitation's bad or good. I'm just kind of talking about. Yeah.
And she says, I know a girl who's been with the same guy for 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
They started dating when she was 17. He was 22. Living together, no ring, and she cheated on him a lot. What's up with that? Because she is a
You's a hoe. I said that you's a hoe.
All right. We got a new soundboard we're going to play with. That's fun.
yeah. But other than that, that's the question. So why is she cheat on her dude that she's been with for so long?
Well, that's a good question. And of course, we know people cheat. And there's a million reasons why. And that's a whole, many episodes. Can dedicate a whole channel to that topic. But that's one thing that from the guy perspective, although Val is a girl who's asking, but from the guy perspective, you got to pay attention to this. And then I'll talk about it the other way. But because what'll happen is a guy will provide, whether it's both their resources combined or whether it's just his resources, the guy will provide a stable environment for her to live in. And then she can live a higher or better lifestyle, right, with a boyfriend or with a guy. And, then she can go out and do whatever she feels like doing. And so remember that some women have a transactional framework. And in fact, they may have a transactional framework just in their head and they can't conceptualize genuine desire, or they just, are with you transactionally and trying to get their desire met someplace else, right? But the point is, it's a transactional relationship. That's why she does it. Okay, she can talk about, I love him, but that's bullshit. What she may love him in her own special way that isn't the way that a guy would want to be loved, which is admiration, respect, and that genuine, deep sexual desire. Like when she gets horny, she is not thinking about the new guy in her DMs that she's going to meet up with on Friday. She's thinking about the guy that's, that she's with, right? That's the guy that supplies her with her sexual needs. Not to say that, she would never get horny over anybody else ever, whatever, right? Obviously girls get horny over everything. And so that'd be crazy. But when it comes down to the actual, I want to get, my sexual and physical needs met, that's who she's turning to, which is the guy she wants to be with, right? And that's the guy that she lives with, all that stuff. And so that's her primary source, we'll say. And so chances are that's not what it is. Chances are he's not her best lay. She's there transactionally. And guys, you got to be careful about this, because you'll be creating a stable life for somebody who then just goes off and does whatever the fuck they want, and they are essentially using you for the stable life that you're creating. And I say creating, I mean, it could mean combining, right? So let's say you both work. Well, if you both work and have combined bills, well, she's still getting a higher lifestyle than what she could do on her own, right? And so she's essentially using you for those resources and then going out and doing whatever. And whatever could be, partying and drinking and being an asshole, or cheating, or going to school, she could be going to school. You see this? She could be going to school and, getting herself in her career or something while she's living with you, and, having all the benefits of your resources. And then once she gets that degree or gets that first job or something, for example, she becomes a nurse and now she gets hired in as a nurse. Well, now she's interested in marrying a doctor, or whatever. And so then you find yourself being broken up with, you know what I mean? Or you find yourself being cheated on at that point, or her at least setting up the mate switch while she's living with you. So because she gets to have the higher lifestyle with you, and then she sets the mate switch up, and now she's got her income from the new job, and so then she can just leave and go do that. I've seen that a lot. Okay. So there's dangers of cohabitation right there, is simply being used, especially if you are the resource provider in the equation. But it still works the same even if you're not, and you're both, combining resources. And so you got to look at that for guys. And I would say women have to look at this as well. Um, Obviously, men and women are different, so guys will do it in a different way. But there's plenty of guys who will get married or have a girl at home that takes care of all the shit at the house while he goes off and does whatever the hell he wants and violates whatever the integrity of that relationship. And she's sitting here being used, whether or transactionally, kind of in a situation where she is the housekeeper and the maid and, the part-time job, and like the person who raises his kids. You see that a lot. That's been going on for a long time with wealthier, we want to prop it up as, well, high status men can do this or whatever, but it's actually quite, shitty and toxic, just because the guy might be high status, for him to have his wife at home that he doesn't really like that much, but she's a good woman, you know what I mean? And then he's out, banging a bunch of other people. That tends to, when it's not really we'll say a consensual situation, meaning he's being dishonest, lying, running off and doing that. That's not any better, just because he can do that. That doesn't mean he should, right? I could argue that a really hot 21-year-old can hitch up with a 35-year-old guy and take his resources and then go bang other people, and ain't anything he's going to do about it, right? Because he's just, happy he has this hot girl that touches his wiener every now and then, and so I could argue, well, she's high value, so she could do that, right? It's the same argument. Toxic is toxic, right? So like, it can't, that's a good sidebar here. We can't use, we'll say, manosphere red pill logic to justify shitty toxic behaviors that destroy your relationships. Like, there's plenty of divorces because the guy thought he could go bang, chicks on when he goes out of town on business, and have an affair with his, one of his subordinates at work, and or the neighbor, and he's the provider, and he has this woman taking care of all the shit at home, and then she finds out and just finally has had enough, because he's not really putting it down at home. It's like this girl that's taking care of him at home and being, even though she's not the primary income or whatever, she's, taking care of a lot of his stuff, right? And she's that good woman. Well, he's not really putting energy, time, effort into her. And she's not necessarily happy. And then she finds out, oh, he's actually been cheating. How many divorces happen because of that? Tons. And then that guy feels like a freaking huge douchebag for doing that. Is that a high value man stuff, guys? I don't think so. All right. High value man stuff is like, I got my girl at home. She's super happy with me and excited to be with me. And maybe you're just monogamous. End of story, because that's what you want. There's nothing low value about that. Or he consensually goes and has other girlfriends and the girl at home knows about it and is okay with it. That would be a high value move, not a deceptive, lie to my wife and the wife sort of doesn't look hard enough because she doesn't want to know. That's not framed. That's not game. That's not high value. That's just lying to somebody because you think you can until you no longer can, right? And so the opposite of that, though, for you guys would be true, which would be the true opposite of that would be the young hot girl who hitches up with a guy with resources and then just cheats on him. Right? I mean, we could argue and we could say to both people in those scenarios that this is not a scenario you should sign up for. Right? So that's an interesting thing. But a lot of times, that's why did this, to answer Val's question, why does, why would she do that? Well, that's why. She had she wanted her cake and eat it too. She had the security of having a higher lifestyle at home with all the boyfriend benefits and the resources that guy brings in while she goes out and bangs other people. And there's plenty of women who do that nowadays. Okay. It's not, they're usually trash women, but they do it. They have a couple sugar daddies. They got boyfriend who goes to work and, and pays the rent, and she's drinking and getting high all day and banging sugar daddies for her, a little bit of money to go buy some weed or, some coke or, to do whatever she wants to do with it. Right. And the guy's not noticing usually either because he's too simplified to to really recognize it. He doesn't want to look at it. I mean, we see this shit all the time. Happens a lot more than you guys realize, especially with the secrecy that women can just sort of hook up with dudes and take their resources on, like, sugar daddy type websites, right? And things of that nature, or just talking in terms of outright cheating. Like, it does happen. It happens all the time. You know what I mean? And so as a guy, if you're the dude who has worked on your value and you have a great environment for someone to cohabitate with you in, you need to pick the right person. Because if you don't, that person's going to be off doing shit out of your pocket and then utilizing your resources in the home that you provide as a safe place to land. Don't get yourself in that circumstance. All right. And same, if I add more, I do have a nice handful of women that do tune in for me, like Val. Thank you very much. Like in yours, the opposite would be, don't settle in with a guy who has, great prospect for having good resources, but, he's the kind of guy who's going to be disingenuous and saddle you with house duties and stuff when he's not providing what you want in the relationship. And he's then also putting you at risk by breaking whatever your commitment agreement is and stuff like that. Right. Like, you just find yourself now with some dude that you're really unhappy with that never takes you out. The sex is lousy because he's not putting effort into it. He's putting effort into some other girl. And, you're find yourself cleaning the damn house all the time and, trying to show up to your work and do everything. And, it's like you see that a lot. It's a shitty place to be, right? So those
We
are
got one more
reasons.
question, Paul, for you.
Yeah.
Better Days asks, how bad can Asperger's affect sexual vibe flow, i.e., too much comfort, bland?
Yeah, man. So if you got Asperger's, I've had guys. Asperger's is not even like a real diagnosis anymore. FYI, they call it autism spectrum. So you're just a lower, like you're on a more functional end of the autism spectrum. Doesn't matter. Hey, it's just terminology, right? Like who gives a shit? But I mean, that's just FYI. Um, it really behooves you to get into something like if you have other parts of your life together and you're a good candidate, like my mastermind program. Now, Better Days, you're in my stuff all the time. You're an avid listener, man. So like, I really want. I'm addressing this, not a general question. I'm saying this directly to you right now because I want you to do well. Okay, I want you to have a good life with everything, but women in particular. I want you to be able to be a good partner to somebody, and in turn have have a chick that's a good partner to you. Whether that's several partners in the dating market, getting into the long-term commitment, whatever. It's whatever you want. I mean, I think if you're good, if you're good to the girls, you deserve to have a girl that's good to you, right? But being neuro compromised and not being able to pick up on the social cues, not being able to pick up on um having difficulty picking up on that communication, right? That is going to hinder you, that ability for your success. So the good news is though is you can learn it. All right. If you're on the what would have been called Asperger's side of it, that means that you are not so far into autism that like you're really having such a difficult time, like you know what I mean. You have an ability, right, to learn this stuff. You just have to find your own way of understanding and learning it. And what I mean by that is like what would be considered normal, natural for other people might not come naturally to you. So you have to kind of dissect it and learn it like somebody who's learning a foreign language, and then play it out and practice it and rehearse it and learn it. And I recommend doing things that would allow you to do that. Finding friends and role playing things like conversations and tone, and you know that could actually help you. Getting into things like, this will sound weird, but actually doing improv, take an improv class, take a public speaking class, but improv's even better. You know what I mean? Where even though you're acting, it's sort of fun. It takes the anxiety out of it. If it's just like improv, like who cares if you screw up, right? But it teaches you to have to play off of somebody and use those social muscles. And for you, things aren't going to come natural. So you're going to have to like learn it, just like Spanish language doesn't come natural to me. Any other language doesn't come natural to me because I really didn't learn it as a kid, but I still learned Spanish, when I had to. And so like, I still could function and speak it a while ago, but and you can do really well then. My mastermind program can help with that. If you're a good candidate, though, we'd have to interview on that. I'm not going to let you get in my program if it's not going to help you. And it's expensive, just right off the bat, but that link is in my website, dude. You can book a call and, myself or Garen can talk to you, and, and that goes for any of you guys. That might be good. And the reason why that's good is because we got a year of work. And so you can, doing these calls and working through things and working through the material in that course too is a lot about persuasion, body language. All that you keep asking me about questions to ask a girl, like you've been asking that. You asked that last time. That's why I didn't answer it. Right. You can go online and look up 36 questions if you want, but it's not about the questions. You know what I mean? It's about the 1-2 level deep thing, but that's hard for you to conceptualize right now. And that's okay. So like, in my coursework, I break it down. I explain that stuff, and then you can practice it and work with, on a Zoom call, like, hey, this is what, I'm trying to do, put an action plan together, get accountability, meet up, have other guys in the group. Like a lot of the guys in my group have done their own meetups, have their own accountability, partners, stuff like that. And like, you could find somebody possibly that would, besides me. I mean, I can help too. Obviously I'm running it, but guys that would work with you on those skills, I say persuasion skills, but for you, it's just really just communication skills, because you can have it. That's the other thing. You can have, a good life with women, man. You just have to learn skills a little differently than maybe somebody who's naturally charismatic. You know what I mean? But who the fuck cares? So you have to put more effort into it. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes having to put more effort into learning something because you struggle with that means you'll end up being better at it in the end. Whereas the average person doesn't put any effort into it at all because it comes natural, but then they build a lot of bad habits and a lot of bad behaviors, and their communication sucks. And they don't even realize their communication sucks, that they're not good at it, because they never really have that push to develop the skill. You have a push to develop the skills. So if you really work on this, I think you're going to be good. All right. So that's directly at you, my friend. And you know what to do. You have a couple of options there. Right. But I would start doing some things that will train you in communication, literally. And that will help you make that connection. All right. All right. So let's go into more pros and cons list here of cohabitation. So let's talk about now when it's bad outside of the article. Okay. The first and foremost reason, here's the reason why it fails, whether you're married, whether you're not married. Okay. It's not just about being married or not married. It's just, being together or not too, because there's a lot of people, again, who do relationships, that do long-term relationships for years, and they live separate. It's more rare, but it does exist. Okay. And that, if that works for you, I'm not telling you it's a bad idea. All right. I'm not telling you either one is a bad idea. I'm just going to tell you the pros and cons. So, and when it would be a bad idea. So when living together is bad, the first thing is, if she is not deep in your frame, living together is a horrible idea. Okay. That's it. I would say a long-term relationship is a horrible idea if she's not in your frame. So what do I mean by that? Right? Like, there's being in your frame, but there's being deep in your frame. Okay. And there's a concept called idealized isolation. I talk about that more in my mastermind group. But being deep in your frame means that she has more psychological barriers between what everybody else is doing and what you guys are doing in the relationship, right? It's kind of like being really on your mental point of origin, but her mental point of origin when it comes to relationship is the relationship frame and the frame that you're leading. Okay. And she's in that, putting that first, and in that mental point of origin when it comes to relationship related decisions and life decisions, and pushing out all of those external things that would pull her out of that or pull her away from that. So that's a little cerebral to understand, but so in other words, like, let's say she has goofy ass friends that are doing ratchet girl stuff, and some of them are cheaters, some of them are this and that, and they, some of them just treat their dudes like crap. Some of them can't, even keep a guy around, right? Like, she's got some friends like that, and they all have their opinions on how she should live her life. Well, she gets in a relationship with you and wants to have a healthy relationship. Those friends become further away. Like, her mental framework is, well, when Amy says that, she's also a cheater who can't keep herself together, so I don't take her opinion seriously. When so and so criticizes my boyfriend, I defend my boyfriend rather than side with her or try to make it like, yeah, and I know, and just try to like glaze over it. You know what I mean? Like, no, I defend my relationship, defend my boyfriend against my friend who's wanting to talk crap about my guy. For example, these are examples of idealistically isolating herself from these outside influences that are harmful to the relationship. That that is where what creates this idealized isolation is your boundaries more than anything else, and the standards that you both have for what you want in a relationship and how you guys treat each other. Okay. So your standards, your boundaries are the key to her psychologically, mentally pushing out these outside sources that are harmful influences on your relationship. All right. And so when and that's and being more idealistically isolated means that um means that she is deeper in the frame. So, for example, she can be in your frame during the honeymoon period when she's, doing fun stuff and having some fun sex with a new partner, and you seem really cool, and you've not had a conflict yet. She can naturally just, be a girl and fall in your frame, no problem, right? Well, what happens when you tell her no? Oh, you just told her no. Well, now she's out of pocket. Now she's out of frame. Now she says, F you don't tell me no. And now she's off doing her own thing. See what I mean? Now, if you live together and that happens, that's a problem now. That's a big problem, isn't it? That's a lot of drama and problem into your life. You see? And so that's why she has to be deep in your frame. So deep in your frame means you tell her no, but she's still invested in holding that relationship together. And no might upset her, but she's not going to handle it in a way where she's now completely out of your frame and out of pocket. She won't even come out of your frame. She might be sad or upset or in disagreement. She might want to talk about it. She might need to go for a walk, or give you the silent treatment, not in a toxic way, but just be like, not talk to you for a few hours or even a day or so when you told her no, and she's really mad or upset or disappointed, but she's not out of frame. Okay. Out of frame happens so quickly when a girl doesn't get what she wants nowadays. And guys, you think you're in frame, and then as soon as she doesn't get what she wants, you find out otherwise, right? That the frame was only conditional of her getting what she wants very, very loosely. In other words, she's not seeing this relationship as the thing that she's investing her future in, where she is, removing those outside influences and ideas, you know what I mean, of going off and doing her own thing. And so her level of investment and her depth that she's into the frame with you. And I don't know anybody else who talks about the depth of a frame, right? And so how convinced, how bought in, how invested is she in that relationship with you and your leadership? That's the depth. When I say deep into a frame. So you want her to a decent level of depth into your frame, not just she see everything seems cool and she's does what you want and she's sort of naturally following your leadership because she's getting everything she wants. You need to know that even when she doesn't get what she wants, I mean, we're going to say acutely, not long term, right? Not like she never gets her needs met. We're not saying that, but because that's going to fall apart eventually. But if she, in the short term, she gets a no or doesn't get something she wants, she's not weighing her options out and doing a pros cons list like it's a transactional situation, or trying to have her cake and eat it too, right? The girl that lives with you and cheats on you. Okay. She's, still loves you and it still respects you, still sees you as the authority and the leader in the relationship that she's surrendered to, right? And she's going to follow your lead, even though she doesn't like the fact that, she's not getting her way right now. she needs to be at that point, okay, before you live with a girl. Because if you don't, you're moving her shit in. You might be moving her shit right out in a month. But the problem is now it's harder for you to do that. It's harder when she goes out of pocket, right? You just made a situation when she moves her shit in where she can more easily go out of pocket and less of the chances of losing you. You know what I'm saying? By letting her move in with you, or like combining and moving in together. So without her being deep into frame, she can again just go do whatever, and there's less of a consequence. Where she doesn't live with you, if she goes and does whatever, you might not be calling her back. You know what I'm saying? You might not be continuing that relationship. And so, and she much bigger risk for her. So you lose a lot of power when you move in, only if she's not deep in your frame. Now, if she's deep in your frame, you actually gain a lot of power. And I'll get into that also. So that's the misconception. The misconception is that you lose power when a girl moves in with you. That is only true if you don't have frame. Okay. Or if you don't have her deep in frame. All right. You don't have to lose power. And of course, a lot of guys have frame. The girl doesn't live with them. They don't cohabitate. Works better for them. They have total good frame with the girl, and she's deep in frame. But in his mind, he feels like if she moves in, he'll lose it. And so that's part of what makes him not want to take that risk, which actually makes it harder for him to keep the frame the way that he has it, and to go deeper, in fact. So that's a thing, right? But generally speaking, though, yeah, it's you only lose power in the relationship if you don't have her in your frame, and if she's not deep in that frame, and deep also in a sexual framework as well. And what I mean is that she's having frequent and very enthusiastic sex with you all the time. So that should go up when you move in together, not down. But and guys who advise with me, my clients, myself, that's always the case in my relationships. You know what I mean? And so that's because the sexual frame is not what most people are doing. Right. That's another thing. So we'll get into that. But so number two, though, is another reason, and another reason it would be a con is if you really don't want her to live with you. So there's guys out there who just don't want to cohabitate with a woman. They have their reasons for it. Could they change their mind? Yes, certainly. But, in that particular mental model that they have in their head, they don't want to live with the girl, right? They want their own stuff, their own things. They just don't want it. But then the girl convinces them. The girl basically leverages the relationship in the frame and kind of, say maybe manipulates, possibly just heavily persuades him to say, yeah, okay, let's cohabitate. Because he likes her, he doesn't want to lose her, whatever it may be. That's never a good reason to cohabitate, to live together. All right. Because now who's frame and who's leading, right? And so you only have her live with you if you want her to live with you. If you don't want her to live with you, don't have her live with you. You can have a relationship, a non-cohabitating LTR. You can have that and maintain that just fine. You will lose some things, and I'll explain what those are. It's inevitable. But if the pros outweigh the cons for you, and she's going to be okay with that, and okay with being in that leadership, well, then that's what you do. But what you don't want to do is be like, oh, well, I guess I have to live with her, and then not like it. Okay. Because now you're just doing things to appease her and her goals without being on your own mental point of origin. And, sometimes it's okay to sacrifice to do something for somebody else. But in this case, when you talk about your entire living situation and your environment, you set yourself up for resenting your partner, and you set yourself up for, basically losing the what a lot of you might be afraid of, which is losing the authority in your own household. You set yourself up for that when you don't really want her to live with you, but you are just conceding. So don't do that. Okay. That's number two, is that would be a con, when it would be bad. Okay. It'd also be bad to cohabitate too early in the relationship, right? Why? Of course, being deep in your frame. Okay. So you don't know enough about her, right? And even if she's deep in your frame, you just don't know enough about her to know if it's a good idea. Now, I should back up here and mention, to cohabitate or not cohabitate is always a pro and con situation. You always lose some things and gain some things in either scenario. When you have a girl move in with you, there's going to be pros and cons to that in that situation. You are weighing them out and saying, okay, I shouldn't say pro and con. It's not even, there's pros and cons usually. What I really mean to say is there's risk and reward. Okay. So you're weighing the risks with the reward in either decision, right? So sometimes you make a decision, and for her to move in, knowing that there's big risks, as long as you set yourself up so that you're mitigating the risks. In other words, if it breaks up and she has to move out, it's not this massive downside problem. And I'll get into that point here more when it comes to protecting yourself. But as long as you're protected, sometimes the risk is worth it. Even if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Okay. So that happens. All right. The benchmark isn't how long you stay together or how long you live together. The benchmark is, does the rewards outweigh the risk? You could have a girl move in with you for a year and there's risks that were high and you end up breaking up in a year, but that year time that you lived together was great. It was better than if you would have lived separate. You know what I mean? So that can be the thing. Or vice versa. You choose not to live with somebody, and you break up or whatever. It's not a situation of, well, should I have had her move in with me? That would have made things better. Nah, not necessarily. You know what I mean? And so it's not just about the breakup or keeping it together. Sometimes relationships need to break up. All right. It's about risk and reward. And did you get, was it the best situation, a better situation for you in the long run for living together or not living together? Or did you cause yourself harm and detriment that was a lot greater than if you had never lived together or if you had not lived together, right? Either one. And so that's how you want to look at this. All right. But too early in the relationship is generally not good. Another one is family, like single mommy or single daddy, right? If you got kids, and then too early becomes a lot longer of a period. You know what I mean? Because now you're not talking about just moving someone in with you and, working that situation out. You're talking about, like, if you have a young kid, you're talking about stepmommy situation in that case, right? And so maybe she's not just cohabitating with you, but she's cohabitating with you and your child or children for, maybe most or not, if depending on your level of custody, right? That means now if she's not going to be the mom to your kid, or a good bonus mom in that case, like for you single dads, then do not bring a girl in there. Do not have a revolving door of vagina having contact with your children. Okay. You have to vet these girls out and also even mitigate the amount of time. If it's a casual date, let's say you're somebody you're seeing and she meets your children casually, and the kids are older, or something, it's not a big deal, but you don't want to be bringing women into your life without knowing. You got to protect your own kids, and women are notoriously bad at this. Okay, so women need to do that even more so, I would say, because there's more of a risk of bringing in a toxic guy than a toxic woman, believe it or not. So if there's kids involved, you're gonna have to consider a lot more on that risk list. You have a bigger risk now. Okay. And then the next one is, if you don't protect yourself legally, all right, and your other person might not even know like what you're doing if you're not married, but you're just combining assets, signing leases together, doing bullshit with no exit strategy, maybe even getting married with no exit strategy. That is a terrible idea. Okay. Especially today in this day and age. So you need to be able to know what the exit looks like in every situation where you start combining these things. Well, whether you're combining or not, you need to know what the exit looks like. Not because you're focused on the breakup and trying to break up with someone, but by knowing what the exit looks like, it removes any kind of fear and need to self protect in a situation where it might break up. Right. And so that's what, you need to look at. If you're married, you need to have the prenups, you need to have the post-nup renewals every couple of years, within the laws of your country or state or whatever. You need to be having a relationship with an attorney if you're married on paper, and knowing what those exits look like. If she's just moving in with you, you need to know what tenant law looks like and what the breakup looks like. Like, does she have a place to go, or is she out on the streets? Because guess what? If it's streets, then, she's not going to become homeless just because she cheated on you. So now you're living with somebody who's cheating on you, and you have to work to evict them or find them another place or whatever. Like, that could be a nightmare. So a lot of you guys, you're thinking too much with your little head, not your big head. And you're not mitigating these risks. And so that's the thing when you move in with somebody thinking everything is just amazing. So you don't need to think about these things, or even like worse, well, we're not married, so I don't have to think about these things. That's a bad idea. You know what I mean? Because there's some places, luckily not my state here, but there's some places where like, you can be considered married, or almost, or at least she has tenant rights, and to a huge degree, even without having signed any paperwork to be there. And so like, you just don't want to have that scenario, right? So these are big decisions, and you need to treat them as such. If you do have somebody move in, it's a simple fact of knowing what the exit looks like, you know? And so that mitigates, remember, it's always a risk and reward decision. So you mitigate the risks. Well, now the reward of having someone live with you is able to be realized without potentially harming yourself. Okay. And so those are some things on the list. Now here's the pros though. Why would you have someone move in with you? Well, if she's deep in your frame, and that includes a sexual framework. And so here's what I mean by that. What I mean by a sexual framework. First of all, she sees you as her sexual best. It goes without saying. Okay. You have enough evidence to believe that based on how she interacts and reacts to you, and based on her history. Okay. And so now with that, she sees you as the guy that she's really in desire with, has had the best sex of her life with. So she's, not necessarily, it's a now bigger risk in her mind to trade you up for a less sexually viable partner. And so that element's there. And then sex is never used as a tool in the relationship for manipulation, or power in that sense. And when I say power, I mean women usually take control of the relationships through sex, through withholding sex or offering sex as reward. That's the essence of a transactional relationship. When she's not happy with you, she's not going to have sex with you now, right? When she doesn't get her way, well, then the sex is going away. And most of you guys put up with that framework. Don't put up with that framework. First of all, if you're not going to have sex with me and you're in a relationship with me, I can go have sex someplace else. I don't need you for sex. The reason we're in a commitment isn't because of your vagina. I mean, obviously, I want that to be great in our sexual relationship to be unique and special and awesome if I'm in an LTR with somebody, but I can go find that elsewhere just as easily as she can find another dick somewhere else. So we're not just, although the sexual connection needs to be the best, that's not the only thing, that is holding it together or the only reasons for us being together. And, if you're withholding that, you're risking not that I just go cheap, but that I just get I decide this isn't for me and I'll go with someone who's more sexually enthusiastic. And any girl that's with me knows I can do that. Just like I know she could go do that too, right? Like, so we're on an equal playing field with that. As a guy, you need to be good enough in the bedroom to create that playing field. Normally, what happens is, and good enough with your game and your value and and stuff, right? Normally, what happens is a guy has scarcity with women more so than the girl has with men. And so she can get laid anytime she wants and decides, right? And break her sexual fidelity. He would struggle to do that. That's what it is in most relationships. Okay. So when she withholds sex, he's not just going to dump her or there's no risk there because he's not sure he would find somebody else who's more sexually enthusiastic right at that point. And so now sex becomes a leverage point for power, which by the way is toxic. Okay. And it's a way that women will take power in a relationship in a very toxic manner. And it's more common for women to do that than not. Okay. That's the unfortunate, sad reality. All right. Is that it's more common for women to use sex as a tool. All right. To manipulate the guy that she's with versus have it something they experience and seek for their own sake and for their own pleasure and for their own bonding. You see what I mean? And so as a guy, you don't accept that framework. When I say you don't accept that framework, I mean, I'm not just saying like the logical discussion about what sex is about. I mean, the behavior, right? Like she's not getting first of all, back to being good at sex. The sex part needs to be something that she enjoys so much that she's punishing herself by turning you down. Okay. So that's the first thing. By saying no to you sexually, she's denying herself. Okay. And that's not even the case. All right. Most women have a better relationship with their vibrators than they do their men. So, it needs to be the other way around. All right. So that's the first thing. Okay. You actually need to know your partner and have a good sexual relationship where it's rewarding for both of you. Now, from there, needs to be seen as a tool, not a tool. That's not what I mean. Sex needs to be seen as, maybe a tool. Sure. Why not? Why don't you use that as a tool for bonding you guys together? Sex creates the neurochemicals for bonding. That's what sex is for. Whether you don't necessarily have to have that logical discussion, but that's the framework. In other words, when we need to be closer, we bang each other. And also sex is rewarding just in and of itself. Sex feels good. It is good for your health and it leads to, overall better happiness in your life. Right. And so now sex with a lot of random partners, though, provides risk for both men and women, doesn't it? And so having a lot of sex with a lot of different people provides a lot more risk than having a lot of really good sex with the person you're with. And so especially for the woman, but I'd say for both, back to mitigating risk. So sex needs to be something that you're having with your partner all the time. If you're bored, bang, have sex. If you guys are mad at each other, fuck each other and then deal with it. A lot of these arguments that you might be having with your partner, what are we arguing about? Once you bang it out, there's not as much of an argument there, right? Not as much of a conflict, not so many bad feelings. All right. A lot of problems that one or the other is creating are easily solved. outside of sex, but by having sex first, you remember why you're here. Okay. And I don't it's just mean, because of the sexual feelings, but the bonding chemicals, the buy-in. Remember, I talk about emotional buy-in. The emotional buy-in is higher when you're having a lot of sex with each other, right? So you're mad at each other, bang. You're happy with each other, bang. You're celebrating, bang. All right. You're bored, bang. You got an intermission or from Netflix special. I don't know why you would take an intermission. I don't know. Just shut it off for a minute. Go ahead and bang each other. You know what I mean? Have frequent sex and, of course, have high quality sex on top of it, right? In a variety. That solves so many problems in relationships. People aren't banging enough. And women in particular are using a big reason is because women in particular are using it as a tool to manipulate the guy, to withhold power because she holds the key to the vagina. And so now she can get him to do or not do what she wants based on whether she opens her legs or not. And guess what? You need to take that power completely away from her. And that needs to be away from her before you move in together. All right. Because that's not a power that she should have over you. It's toxic. Okay. You guys need to not be using the primary bonding mechanism you have as a means of trying to have power in a toxic way over one another or trying to manipulate behavior for one another. Not really. That's not good. All right. And so that's a framework that needs to not be like, you need to have a different sexual framework than what everybody else is doing. If you have that and she's deep in your frame, now what happens when you move in together? You have a lot more sex, right? Because you just around each other more. And so you're there together more, you're around each other more, you have a lot more sex. And then, you of course make sure that you're not just having easy access, boring sex, that as the man leading, you make sure that you're providing different experiences, creating variety, exploring, boundaries and new things with each other and all that stuff, right? All the things that make it fun. The sex doesn't go down. All these dudes and even these coaches out there that'll tell you that the sex goes down once you get married and once you're comfortable in a relationship. I'm here to tell you that it does not have to. All right. And if both of you are sexually motivated and see sex in the right framework, you have more sex when you're in a relationship together and living together, not less. So there is a benefit right there. And you actually keep the frame and keep her deeper into your frame easier when she's there to begin with, when you guys move in, when you have frame and leadership. Because, now your lifestyles are combined and she's getting your leadership for her lifestyle, not going off on her own in your absence. Okay. So like her main tool of taking frame away from you is to withhold or remove sex. You don't allow that to be a tool anymore. What happens? Well, now living together means she's actually more in your frame. Okay. And the sex is more frequent. So that's a different paradigm and framework than what I don't think anyone's talking about that. All right. I don't know of anyone anyway else. So, but I'm seeing that not just in my own life, and that was to include relationships that didn't last that long where I lived with somebody, as well as ones that lasted, quite a few years. It didn't have to be the case and never was. It was not the case for me for quite some time, we'll say, where the sex went down. You know what I mean? So that, and my clients, like once someone's working with me and I open up this sort of paradigm and then they open up this paradigm for their partner, like, holy shit, like their whole life changes. You know what I mean? And it's better for the girl. Like the manipulation and the power she gets through manipulation with sex, if she's allowed to have that, right? If that's permitted in the conditions and boundaries of the relationship, that doesn't help her out, like it doesn't help her out as much as having frequent and good sex with her partner does to create better bonding, better emotional buy-in, better bonding, better empathy for your partner, better, more of a desire to understand each other, more of a desire to take care of each other. That's what makes for a better relationship. That gives a woman more power, because the need to be taken for a guy, the need to take care of a woman is a instinctual thing for a man. And him feeling taken care of by her is the power that femininity brings into a relationship. Okay. Manipulation by removal or gifting of sex is not that much power in comparison to the feminine power she has by complimenting and bettering his life, by being a nurturing and good partner and making him feel like he's got a safe place to land, so to speak. And also, on top of the sexual connection, like more frequent sex makes the guy more motivated to to take care of her, and her being able to be somebody who could be taken care of. That's more of a drive for guys. Now, women need to select carefully, though. Don't select the douchebag that is going to take advantage of all this stuff. There are users and people who take advantage of others, and people who have who aim to have toxic power over others on both sides of the gender, right? There are men that do it, there are women that do it. So you have to select carefully. All right. But if you select carefully, moving in is not a bad idea. All right. As a man, your house is still your house. Even if you move into her house, it's now your house. Okay. I know that sounds really misogynistic, but it just goes back to your authority. Okay. Like, you need to have responsibility as a man to take care of things, but with that comes authority. And a lot of guys lose the authority in their own homes when they move a girl in. And next thing you know, they don't even have a place to be private or be by themselves. You know what I mean? Like, or, they don't like, there's no place that the guy can call his own in his own home. And this leads to the whole man cave bullshit. You know what I mean? Hey, have a cool basement that you do man shit in. That's fine. I'm not discounting that, but you shouldn't feel like you have to ostracize yourself to your garage or your basement in your own home. I know that's kind of a traditional model and it's been done for, decades. However, it's not necessarily, she should have space too, by the way. You both should have space you can escape to when you need to be alone or need to be whatever. If you have a small place, you just respect each other's space when you need it. That's a big thing. When you're living together, you'll learn how to not crowd each other and how to respect each other's space. Okay. But that's mutual, though. That's not just one-sided. So what you end up with, and a lot of times is, I see more often than not, is the girl takes over the house and everything is decorated in every room and every function of everything is the way she wants it. And he doesn't feel like he can be in his own place, because then she'll nitpick and nag and do stuff if he's not doing what she would like him to do or whatever. You get what I'm saying? That's another toxic way of having power and taking power and authority from a man. And in a lot of transactional relationships, that's too, especially, that's a lot of times what women will do. And you can't have that. That's not good. Now, that doesn't mean you don't let your girl like do whatever. Like, if I haven't, I want, my girl lives with me or whatever, I want her to, decorate, as long as it's not something I wouldn't want for decoration. Like, I have to approve it, but like, I'm the final approval. But yeah, freaking put what, you want plants, you want to do some more plants in this room and whatever, you're going to water them. Sounds good to me. You know what I mean? You want to make this look cool. You want to give it this, look nicer, whatever, like, please do. Right. Like, I'm a dude, so it's good to have a woman come in and make your shit look nicer. provided she's actually making it look nicer, provided she's not a total mess, because a lot of women are actually mess, right? They're just messy. And provided that, it's her style and her taste is good, right? Like, don't come in with bad taste and try to change my house around. And so, like, these are all things that are just fine, but you don't want to lose authority in your own house because and all of a sudden because you brought somebody in, or not have authority in someone else's house because you moved into her place. You don't want to have that fight, and then in the fight it's like you get treated like you don't actually live there. You know what I mean? That should never happen. That's not a good way. That's not a fair or good way of fighting each other, right? And so having the exit strategy though in mind, like I mentioned, mitigates a lot of that. Well, this is my house stuff. Okay. Because it's like, okay, maybe you want it to be your house. I'll just leave. And we know what that looks like. Like, let's not talk about that shit. We either live together and we're cohabitating and this is your home too and my home too, or then I can move someplace else and we know what exit looks like, right? So yeah, so that tends to mitigate that. It's a lot easier if she's the type of woman to do so, for her to complement your life if she lives with you. It's also a lot easier for her to be a detriment to your life. Okay, to suck your time and your energy away, and for being more toxic to you and stuff like that, and bringing arguments and problems and issues to your lap and making bad choices that now you're responsible for. These things happen more so when you live together. When you don't live together, she decides, she's in some kind of mood or she wants to bring toxic shit to you. You can just be like, yeah, I'm working right now, or I'm going to the gym, or I'm cleaning my bathroom. So I'll talk to you later. And you don't have to put up with it. But when she lives with you, she's right there, right? So if she's the kind, so what's the vetting process then? Does she complement your life, and does she want to do that more? Is that what she's working towards? If that's the kind of woman she is, then moving in together could be good. If she's the kind of person who is sucking your time, energy, and effort away all the time, and it's a time sink, and she takes value from you and doesn't bring value to you, well, now you're going to have somebody that is going to do more of that once they move in with you, right? So that's something you need to pay attention. Um, yeah, and I think that covers really all of my talking points on the topic. Living with somebody and cohabitating, and I know this is going to be counterintuitive for some of you guys who, um, whatever your weird shit and thoughts are. Um, but cohabitation, though, is not this terrible, horrible such thing that, a lot of guys warn about on the internet. Okay. It can be, if you don't do the things I said. If you don't have the frame, if the sexual framework isn't where you want it, you don't have authority in your own house. You know what I mean? If it's too early in the relationship, you're not really planning a future together. You're just making decisions. She's a detriment to your life. You don't protect yourself legally or logistically. No exit strategy. Like, if you don't follow the things I said, yeah, you're gonna suffer when you cohabitate with somebody, for sure. Unless you get very, very lucky. But luck is not a good retirement model or strategy now, is it? And so if you choose to not follow the things I tell you in this video, well, then you're in for a problem if you end up cohabitating, living with somebody. I mean, that's just the reality. However, if you do choose to follow the things I'm saying, making the decision to live with somebody can actually be a very good thing. Even in my relationships that have broken up, it was, and I no longer lived with a girl afterwards. Okay. It was more beneficial for us cohabitating, living together, than it was not. You know what I mean? And so in those situations, pretty much all of the situations, I'd have to say, you know, I had lost frame in my first marriage because I didn't know a lot of this stuff, you know. So my marriage, like when I was in my 20s, you know, like I didn't know what I was doing. And so I was not, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things that was doing wrong there. And so living together wasn't necessarily good for her and I would say. Actually it was bad in the beginning, but in the end though, it actually wasn't bad. It was actually better that we had cohabitated, especially, you know, with when we adopted my son. So in the end, I don't regret having cohabitated with the person that I did was in a marriage with. In my relationships afterwards, where I did cohabitate with my LTR, and it wasn't every single LTR, okay, but it was always beneficial for me. But that's because the sexual framework was always there. That's because at the time she was deep in my frame. And there were other reasons why. And I basically I listed to list all the things here. I had all these blocks checked, and that's why it wasn't a detriment to me. It was a compliment. It was good. It was better for the relationship for us to live together. So some of you guys have mental blocks when it comes to this, and that's more of an inner game issue. Okay, I'm gonna have a video dropping probably by tomorrow at Apex Inner Game, the channel where I've only done one video at. That you guys, really good video though on cheating. You guys do need to subscribe over there because I'm going to put higher quality content there. I'm going to put another video out, work on final touches, should get out tomorrow. But that's an inner game thing. A lot of you guys are afraid, and I've coached guys, more than one guy, usually guys who've gone through the divorce machine, and they're paranoid about moving in or cohabitating with a girl because they're afraid of losing their frame. They're afraid of becoming betatized like they once were, not recognizing or realizing that they have more relationship skills and they are more into their self as a masculine man, and they have more value than they did when they were in their marriage. So the likelihood of them being betatized, losing frame, and everything falling apart is a lot less likely. But in their minds, they're still very fearful of that. And a lot of times there is a skill gap. In other words, their skill is not there to keep that frame. And so they need to work on that before they consider moving in anybody into their house. But there are times too, though, where, you know, they would actually be okay. Like it would be a good scenario for them. And they are in a scenario where they're long-term planning with this girl. And yet their fears and paranoias from previously bad experiences are preventing it. And that's a thing where, you know, we need to work on your inner game for that. We need to go work on removing those mental obstacles and blocks and embracing the new skill that you do have in keeping a relationship together, and also skill in selection. So you're not selecting somebody that's going to be a bad partner to you, maybe like your previous ones. And so that right there, you know, is something that needs to work on. And so that's where you want to jump in and you want to click that link, get at the very least, get my alpha mindset course and start doing some work there to remove some of those barriers. Because if you have value and you have skill and you have frame, and you have a girl that wants to cohabitate. Now that's the other thing. The other side of this is, here's the negatives of not cohabitating, is that, you know, the girl's going to stick with you and be attracted to you because of desire if everything's going well. But once the desire is there, what she has to be able to do is go through her transactional checklist and make sure that she is getting her needs met. So just wanting to be with you and being sexually attracted and desiring and being emotionally drawn to you isn't enough to get her to stick with a commitment. Trust me, I know during my notch count days when I was blowing through girls, I actually wasn't this high value guy who had made like high income and did really well for myself and all this stuff. That wasn't me back then. You know, being a transient military guy, I was just a Chad who banged girls. And being that guy, a lot of these girls would have the high desire. But I was the fantasy guy for them. They weren't looking, I was the breeder, back to that model a few videos ago. They weren't looking at me as a long-term prospect, and they in fact knew I wasn't going to be. They saw me as alpha enough to be a good breeder, but not alpha enough for them to want to invest anything long term in, and certainly not enough beta qualities either. Like, it wasn't just like my beta qualities weren't there, it was also like my stability wasn't there. My financial status wasn't there, my entanglements with other women and other things going on in my life wasn't there. Like, there were a lot of things, you know what I mean, that weren't in my life. And so the they desired me sexually. They would want to just be with me all the time, but they would move on very quickly. Sometimes they would have their few sex romps and they would be like, oh, that was amazing. I'm going to take that fantasy and hold on to that for a while. Now I'm going to go back to trying to get this guy who's better matched transactionally and hope he can be the guy, because their mental model is strategic pluralism, which is, well, the guy who's good in bed and that makes me feel really good. Well, that's not the same guy that I can have a life with, like that's their mental model. Right. And so they end up going with the guy who's a better transactional match. And then, of course, that's the trap, right? Because then they're wishing they were in something different years later. But either way, if you want that LTR to work out, yeah, you got to be that Chad for her in a sense, right? Her version of it, her experiential version of that guy, the desire, right? But she has to have those transactional needs met, or else she has to either change those transactional needs, means saying, okay, well, I guess this isn't important to me, or I guess I'll compromise. I guess I'll get rid of that. That's not really a need. Somebody need to have. She has to be willing to break those rules and break those needs, which she might be willing to do for some of those. Or she needs to meet those needs. If she doesn't, she won't stay in a relationship, even if she has the desire. I mean, she'll try to break free from that a lot. And so for some girls, their transactional needs involve living with their partner. And you may be able to, with your frame and by meeting her other needs, be able to demonstrate that, hey, we can be non-cohabitating and it's still a better deal for you to be with me versus being with another guy that doesn't meet all your other needs, but you live with him, right? That can be something that could happen, and it does happen. But normally, though, a girl's not going to be able to really get over the fact that she can't live with you if that's what she thinks, and chances are that's what she thinks she needs, because a girl wants to know, part of her hypergamous needs is legacy, meaning to know that, okay, if I pick the best I can do, will he also take care of me over time? And hey, don't live with me and pay your own bills over there doesn't really demonstrate a willingness to take care of her over time. You see what I mean? It leaves her with a sense and a lack of security. And so this is why a lot of you guys find yourself in this dilemma, which is the girl leaving you because her transactional needs aren't being met. Her security needs aren't really being met. I mean, it's not even fully transactional. It's just, it's secure, just her feelings of security aren't being met because you're not living together after a certain point in time, right? And so you have to now feel like you have to make this choice to have her move in with you, or else you lose the girl, but then you're sacrificing your frame and you're sacrificing your freedom and all those things, right? You are making some sacrifices when she moves in for sure, right? You're dealing with another person's shit. She's in front of your face longer. You have to put more effort sometimes when it comes to the frame issue. Right? But really though, you don't have to lose frame and lose sexual frequency and desire and even lose dread or any of those things that you think you maintain, that you maintain thinking it's only because of not cohabitating. Reality is you can maintain all those things and actually increase the things you want. You can increase the depth of your frame, increase the desire, increase the lifestyle and the benefits to each other when with her moving in, if you do it the right way. So you don't have to. This is a false framework to think, well, gee, I have to make her choose me non-cohabitating, where then she's kind of out of, she's struggling to stay in your frame now. She's not as deep in your frame. She's wondering, should I stay or should I go a lot, right? I have to make that decision, risk her leaving or lose a bunch of shit and get beta-tized. Like, that's not your choices. There's another choice, which is she can move in and you can have a better frame and a better relationship because of it. All right. So just keep that in mind. If you follow the rules and the things that I'm telling you here, that can happen, provided you're selecting the right girl. Okay. And provided that your skills when it comes to these things are good. So don't limit yourself with dumb binary shit. Okay. One internet guy says, don't live with a woman because it makes it sound, gets the clicks and gets the likes. And, so that's the only way you think it is. You know what I mean? Now I got friends and people I know who don't live with women and they make it, and it works just fine. Right. So like, I'm not shitting all over that option. All right. But I'm just telling you, that's not the only option. Okay. And, you don't have to lose when someone moves in with you. You can win provided you have the right framework. And you can also win when they don't move in, right? If her transactional needs are able to be sort of rationalized and looked at, where she goes, I'm at this stage of my life and I'm okay living someplace else. And I don't need to live with him if he doesn't want it. And we're really happy and all this. Hey man, like that works too. Right. So, I'm not saying that can't be the thing, but just know that you have more than one option here and you need to decide what it is you want to do, because when you're getting and building a life with some girl, you need to decide what life you're building and what you want that to look like. That's not up to me. All right. I'm just here to tell you how to do it, how to get what you want, and what your options actually are. Because a lot of you guys aren't even aware that you have more than two options or binary options, or one failing option and another one that's worse of a failing option. Like you have options that are good. Okay. So that's all I got on cohabitation for today. Glenn, we got any other questions in the chat?
Yes, we do. We got a super chat from T Diamond.
T Diamond.
T Diamond asks,
all right.
Hey,
yes.
She's getting added to the harem.
That's fine. Added to the harem. T Diamond.
She says, if different men are playing mind games, testing boundaries, negging, or criticizing, is it the girl's fault? Because she says, I don't want to stop being respectful.
Oh, I don't know.
You know what I think it is, T Diamond? I think it's because he is just.
She's not a Christian.
You just wanted to use that. You just
I
wanted
did.
to use
I did. I did.
That was not even real advice. It's like, well, so here's the thing. I would have to look at your situation and what's happening, because it may be him trying to have control in the relationship in a, what I would consider a more of a toxic way, rather than with a way that's healthy, in a way that fits good, healthy communication. Okay. That could be the case, that it's exclusively something just he's doing. All right. I'm not removing that option, but there's also could be the case where you're doing stuff that's creating a situation where he does not feel comfortable or good with the framework in the relationship of the way it is. And so he feels like he is not, like you're not in pocket. Okay. Like you're doing things or saying, or there's little things that makes him feel like you're not in pocket. And so he's doing these things to try to correct or respond to some behavior you're doing. And there, a lot of times it's not isolated. In other words, sometimes, even in my own life, sometimes I just react and it's a shit reaction. And I have to apologize for it because there's a reason I reacted that way, but it wasn't really good. It wasn't appropriate. Okay, that happens. And that's in any relationships, friendships, or whatever, right? But there's sometimes the other person is doing something that creates a reaction. And here's the thing: you can't fully blame someone for their reaction to something you're doing, even if their reaction isn't optimal. And that's the thing that like happens a lot in relationships. And a lot of times women like to do that, unfortunately, which is they do shit that isn't really good, isn't really healthy. And sometimes they're not even aware, sometimes they're aware and they know damn well what they're doing. All right. And then they're going to try to mental gymnastics their way around that shit. And they know what they're doing. But sometimes, okay, they're just not aware of how certain ways of saying things, showing up, wording things, certain behaviors is affecting their man. They just aren't empathetic. They just don't see the effect. And then the guy's reacting to it. And then she's reacting to his reaction, and it's like maybe, and then it's like a lot of times during when the communication's happening and it becomes evident that she's doing something to contribute to the problem, she will a lot of times defer any sort of personal responsibility because, well, you shouldn't have yelled at me, right? Or you shouldn't have used that word, or you shouldn't have, yeah, you know what I mean? So it becomes a criticism about how the guy should have done something better versus ownership of what the girl did to cause the problem in the first place. That is something we don't want to do, right? As a girl, you need to be willing to look at and always ask yourself, what part am I accountable here? Right? He's got to do the same thing. Okay. But that's something you got to ask yourself. If he's doing, that's the first thing you need to ask yourself. And you might not see it. And so that could be also a discussion. Remember, guys are very literal. So if he's negging you, let's say, you might ask the question. So I don't know, I think you're being funny, but why are you, how come you're giving me like this weird backhanded compliment? Like, is there something I'm doing that's causing you to want to do that or say that, right? This is the call out the elephant in the room technique, right? Whereas you literally just say what it is. You remove the kayfabe. You know what I mean? You remove the theatrics and you just get to the fucking thing. And sometimes it's really effective. It's more effective when a woman does that to a dude, I will say, because guys are just more literal and less good at direct communication. So when a girl like calmly and, not just calmly, like I'm being calm, but I'm going to go off on you any minute kind of calm. Okay. But I mean, in a nurturing, feminine way, says, when you talk to me like that, it doesn't make me feel really good, babe. Like I feel like shit. Well, why would you say that? Or why would you, and you say it like that, like, fuck, dude, most guys are gonna be like, I'm sorry. I don't know what to I didn't mean it like that. I don't know, and then don't let it go necessarily. Just but let it go in a sense of forgiveness. But what I mean is like, get to the bottom of it. Don't let them go, I don't know, like, no, really, like, there's some reason. Is it just bad habits or, bad patterns from another relationship? Am I doing something wrong? And that should be the question. Always ask, like, am I doing something, that's causing that, and it doesn't absolve him of his responsibility of behaving the right way, but it allows him to illustrate if there is something and if there is a problem, and you can now address that. And it might be like, okay, I can see how I'm doing that, but really that doesn't justify this response, right? Like I still shouldn't be treated like that. And he should be like, yeah, I know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. And then you'll be like, yeah, okay, cool, right? And I'm gonna, I didn't realize I was making you feel that way with whatever I was doing. I'll work on that. I'll pay attention to that. That's your action plan. You know what I mean? So like, healthy communication is being willing to take personal responsibility. And that's kind of the beginning of it. We have the Luca method where the guy should lead with that, and the ENSA is the girl part of it. Okay, but those, you've probably seen those videos already, and he needs to do his part. You need to do your part, but each person needs to be coming to the table with, where's my responsibility here? Right. And it's harder. I feel like it can be more challenging for a woman to do that sometimes, just in terms of the way we're wired and socially conditioned. However, that doesn't mean that that's not still the right answer. Right. And so I don't know. To answer your question, I don't know whose fault it is. Right. But that's up to you to find out in that relationship by asking the right questions and recognizing that even if he's not doing something that's healthy or optimal, sometimes it's not unhealthy or bad. It's just not optimal. Like he could have worded it better, right? Or he could have done it something better. Okay. Okay. Well, why is he responding in the first place? And we want to look at that. And I've seen actually there's a lot of women out there who are smarter but also more manipulative types where they do this intentionally. There's not saying this is you, but there's a lot of women that will do things subtle on purpose to create a reaction out of the guy and then use that knowing that the guy's going to have a bad reaction and that it'll be less than optimal. And then she uses that to control the guy. So she says or does a little thing that's kind of implies something that strikes up, feelings of, disrespect or anxiety from the guy. Then he reacts, maybe he overreacts or reacts in a way. And then she then goes, oh, see how I'm hurt and offended and you're so toxic and bad.
Hey,
You are-
also, T Diamond gives us a good example because she just wrote an example for you. She
Okay.
says, the example is, I just walked in somewhere and he flat out told me I look stupid with my mask on. He also tried to get in my business whether I was jabbed or not.
Is that really what it was about?
I don't know, but that's what she said.
Well, how do I tread lightly on this one? Well, first of all, was this a guy you were with or was this just some random guy? I don't know. But here's the thing. You need to be with somebody where your values match up too. The whole mask versus no mask, jab versus no jab is a really triggering thing for people. It's something that people are very passionate about and passionately for or against a lot of times. And so if you're with a dude or dating a dude and it's something that like you're super passionate about wearing a mask and making sure you're vaccinated for COVID and he thinks it's bullshit, but to a point where he's going to tell you look stupid with a mask on and then start asking you about vaccines, like it's probably not a guy you should be dating, and I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I personally think the mask thing is bullshit. And I think that the vaccination stuff was, I don't want to get myself, because I'll get mad on YouTube if I talk about it like too negatively, which is, you should tell you something, by the way, that I can't have an open conversation about this on YouTube without risk of censorship. It's pretty terrible times we're in with corporate censorship like that, isn't it? Because we should be able to have this conversation. But I do think that the mask thing was way overdone. And I do think that the vaccination and the way in which it was done was a gigantic money grab. I think that it's also, I think that the later versions of the vaccine are also very good for some people, like elderly people and people at risk, for example. So I have different opinions. I'm not going to, get seriously irritated, like to where I'm going to create an issue with a girl who's wearing a mask and tell her, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to do that. But it also depends on when did this happen? Did this happen last week or did this happen in 2020 when it first broke out? Like 2020, when it first broke out, like I didn't care to wear a mask anywhere, but I did anyway, just because those are the rules. And I don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. That was why I did that. You know what I mean? And that's being considerate for others who have a different opinion than me. And that's why I would do that. And I would never, at that time, sit here and call somebody out. if some girl met me somewhere today wearing a mask and I'm in a place where nobody's wearing masks anymore, and like it's like I'm probably not going to want to date that girl. Her and our values and our opinions are going to be way too off. You know what I mean? And we're not going to be a good match at all. So I would say just you need to make, when these things crop up, I mean, he did you a favor. If your value system was, I need to be wearing the mask and I need to be vaccinated and all this stuff, and I'm, that's where I'm at, and he's passionately against that and doesn't want you to do that, he's just not the right guy, right? Like, that's just not the right guy for you. You know what I mean? And so that's the way I would look at that, So, man, that's a one you got to tread lightly on, isn't it? So I say like a counter opinion to like,
Yeah,
the way it was before. I don't know. This would just be a banned video.
so she says one more thing. My side, hold on. She goes, my side, it was a guy I met up with a few times, but I don't do casual sex with him or send pics. Yeah. I think that's the big reason, and I stopped seeing him.
I don't know about that.
He was kind of, I guess, a booty call, and he got a little too, familiar. And
she said she didn't have sex with
him. But I'm saying like that's kind of like the way that he wanted to, have that relationship. She said she didn't. She said she met up with them a few times, so he's trying to get familiar. He's trying to like doing like the making fun of her, the teasing, to kind of become a little bit more familiar with her, but she didn't let him get that far, and that is one of the reasons why, because he was being rude.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I mean, maybe he was less bought in to because you didn't bang him, but I don't know. I disagree, because if you had given up the sex early, maybe he doesn't, have that same respect he's probably not going to have the respect for you and your opinion either way. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you gave the sex up early, he's going to have that level of power over you now because of the sex and everything. And then he's probably going to imply that opinion. Maybe he doesn't imply that opinion prior to him wanting to get laid. Okay. But whatever, it's that opinion's coming out, whether you bang him on the first date or whether you wait. Probably good you waited, right? For your scenario, make sure you get to know him a little bit.
Come on, ladies, you got to save that. You got to save your value and keep on giving it away too quickly. It might not be a good thing. Might be told that you're for the streets.
Right. So yeah, you got to meet somebody who matches your values in that area, or at the very least, you guys can come to some sort of, say agreement. It's not so much compromise, but where you're seeing eye to eye and you're accepting, right? Like I said, like in 2020, I mean, I was getting back from Afghanistan, and the person I was with felt the way I did, but if I was with somebody or in the dating market in 2020, when, I use that as the thing, because that's right when things broke off, and girls were really like, some girl, I go on a date, some girl was really kind of paranoid about the mask thing. And I still think it's stupid, but I'm going to respect her opinion and her stance and understand where she's coming from a lot more than now in 2023. You know what I mean? Where, it's not, we see more data and evidence now. It's not, the maskers and the vaxxers and the way that it got handled. Okay. They were wrong. I'm sorry, but they were wrong. Okay. They were wrong on a lot of things, not everything, but on a lot of things. We know that now, and people are reacting that way now, right? They're treating it that way now. If I have somebody who's still stuck in 2020 and I meet up with them, I'll probably, I'm not gonna, I might make fun of them a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, why are you wearing this stupid mask? Like, what's like, do you got like a health disorder? But I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. I might maybe not. I don't know. It just depends on the context, right? But I'm probably not going very far with her. If that makes any sense. You know, I'm less gonna see eye to eye, even with a disagreement with somebody who insists on wearing a mask today than back in 2020. You get what I mean? And so, like, you don't always have to agree with your partner, but if you respect each other's stance and can live with it, you know, that's okay. You know, and part of leading as the man is to accept that, hey, you know what? She feels a little differently about this thing, and it's not critical to the relationship that she agrees with me or whatever. And so she can do the thing that she, you know, some examples would be a guy who might be, let's say, an atheist, and she wants to go to church. What is he gonna, you know, is it that if you don't believe in it, is that important to you that she doesn't believe in it too? You know, she wants to go to church every now and then with her family. Like, you know, you gonna freak out about that because you don't believe in it. Like, you know what I mean? No, like, you know, she let her have it, right? Being a leader and having frame doesn't mean that you control her every move and every opinion. All right. So, but some things though are going to be a major ideological difference and a lifestyle difference where it's just not a good match. That's what that sounds like that was. And I wouldn't get too caught up in that one. I would just say that he's not a good match. And that's it. You know, maybe he didn't handle that the right way. Who cares? He's gone now. All right. Go get a different guy who's a better match. So what else we got, man? If anything.
That was it for super chats. I'm looking in here for a few other things, but no, I think that's it. I mean, there's some questions in here about there's just stuff that, you know, you don't even really deal with, you know. So that's, I'm not
super chat worthy then.
Yeah, it's not chat worthy. It's not question worthy. So I'm not going to bring it up. But T Diamond did respond. She said, I definitely wear a mask on a crowded train. People are musty as hell. Okay. And I caught a cold since public masking wearing. So, oh, well, or what'd she say? She caught a cold, right? Since people haven't been wearing masks, I guess.
Oh, yeah. But you might have caught it without it. And, you know, I mean, a train situation. I mean, I don't know. If you take mass transit, like if you're in, like, let's say New York or something like that, I guess. You know, it wouldn't bother me, I guess, as much in that scenario. It depends. I would say, though, I mean, again, that's your choice, though. Like, that's your choice. I respect your choice. That's what you want. I would argue, you know, getting sunlight and vitamins and maxing that stuff out as I cough. I got a cold from T Diamond just now.
Oh shit, really? She's on your phone like that?
Dude, on the internet. I caught a cold. I didn't have a mask on.
No, you know what?
But
I believe it. She gave you a virus.
That's it. I got COVID now. No, you know what it is? It's so like when I go into like military environments still, if I'm not what I do is I increase I make sure like if I haven't been taking vitamins or, you know, whatever, I increase my vitamin intake, you know, especially things like C and, you know, your zinc and some of those things. But I just increase my vitamin intake and I make sure of vitamins as well as getting it through the diet as well. Right. I find that more than anything prevents me from catching some sniffles from somebody. You know, and washing your hands and not putting my hands on my face. You know what I mean? Because I'm not going to get close enough, you know, to people to get that. But I mean, if it smells musty and it's weird and that may, you know, you feel more comfortable with wearing a mask, wear it. But, you know, you just got to know, like, some people might have an opinion about that and whatever, you know, it is what it is. You got to either find a good match or find somebody that doesn't share that same opinion or be willing to compromise on that. Right. Those are your choices. Basically. I respect whatever you do, you know, it's your choice, but so that I think that'll close.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen and ladies, that will conclude this episode of Apex Intergame with Paul Benjamin. Until next Tuesday, peace out.
Later.